Hello and welcome to Perspectives, where we'll take a deep dive into the issues of the day and where we'll take a look at people's opinions on such issues. I am Ruth Osime. Welcome back to Perspectives here on Arise News. Today, we will examine the delicate and often volatile intersection of reputation, free speech, and the power of words. Imagine being accused of something so serious. It threatens to dismantle the reputation you've built and you spent a lifetime building. Yet, the accuser provides no concrete evidence to support their claims. How do you defend yourself against baseless allegations, especially when the language used against you is so inflammatory that it naturally ignites an equally harsh reaction? But what if some parts of the accusations hold true? How do you address the criticism, take responsibility, and attempt to rebuild trust without letting emotion cloud your judgment? Incidents like the ongoing dispute between Dele Farotimi and Afe Babalola, or the public clash between Burna Boy and Speed Darlington showcase how damaging of substantiated accusations and inflammatory rhetoric can be, not just to reputations, but to the broader discourse. How does one resist the instinct to react with rage, knowing it may only add fuel to the fire? What role do logic, restraints, and fear of causing further damage play in shaping a response? Today we explore these pivotal questions. How should individuals navigate the storm of public accusations, balancing self-defense with accountability while mitigating long-term fallout? Join us as we unpack these issues with our expert panel and invite your perspectives on these complex and deeply personal challenges. Break, but stay with us because we'll be right back to usher in the guests. Frank Tietie and Bukky George Taylor. Perspectives will return in just a moment. Well, my guests are ready and waiting, starting from Frank Tietie, who is a lawyer, activist, social entrepreneur, and public affairs commentator. Frank is recognized for his advocacy on human rights, social justice, and the rule of law in Nigeria. He has been involved in numerous high-profile cases and constantly speaks about corruption, injustice, and equality within Nigerian society. Joining us too is Dr. Bukky George Taylor, who is a communications expert, author of Born to Stand Out, and managing director of Robbie Taylor Media. Wonderful to meet you guys this morning, and thank you for spending time with us today on Perspectives. Let me start with you, Bukky.
Thank you, my pleasure.
Okay, good to see you, Tietie. I'll be right back to you soon. Let me just start with Bukky.
My pleasure.
Okay, so let me start. What steps should one take when confronted with damaging accusations? And how can individuals maintain composure to avoid reactive decisions that might affect the situation?
Sure. I mean, facing damaging accusations and, crisis is something that does happen and can happen to anybody. But what's most important is how you manage it. First things first, I tell everybody is you have to be calm and you really have to assess the situation, because a lot of people respond too quick without assessing the entire situation. How bad is this? Where is the news flying? Is it on social media? What's really happening? And then you have to then, start to gather your facts, fact-finding, responding to some of these accusations. And then, of course, I always mention that people need to get into the habit of hiring the right hands to handle situations like this. Are you getting a lawyer? Are you working with a public relations agency to help you communicate? Because everything you say and do actually does matter.
Okay.
Definitely.
Okay, let's get on to Tietie. Tietie, where are you? Are you in the house? Okay. How can we balance, good to see you again. How can we balance freedom of speech with preventing its misuse for harmful accusations? Should there be strong legal consequences for spreading false claims?
Of course, yes, there should be, and there exists a lot of very strong punitive legal positions against false statements that are made that injure people's reputations, that injure that affect and negatively affect the reputations of corporations, not only natural human beings. And these legal provisions have been in existence before the age of before this age of the internet in this country. So we merely reinvented the wheel with all of those provisions in the Cyber Crimes Act. So in that case, it's very important because in this world, particularly in the modern world of today, reputation is all many people have. Yeah. And actually the reputation business is so big that we have an industry called the public relations industry that manages the reputation of both individuals and corporations. But it's important to know that the twin pillars of democracy are free speech and the ability to make changes, that is, to change the government, that is, to vote. So the right of persons to elect leaders and the ability to speak your mind, are the definitions of defining features of democracy, particularly in Nigeria. And we have a very fantastic provision in our constitution that says the right to hold opinion. It's not just about the freedom of speech. In Nigeria, you have the right to have a perspective over an issue. But in Nigeria, the Constitution goes further to say that perspective, that opinion, you also have a right to express it in whatever medium you choose, even if it means establishing an institution, whether it's a school or a media house. So we enjoy a very robust freedom of speech regime in this country, and there's a jurisprudence to that effect, and that is, instead, when people are angry, when people are disenchanted, either with government or with anybody, they should have the ability to hold opinion about such persons and speak up, because that makes it antithetical to dictatorship. That means that it provides for the citizen, instead of taking up arms to venge his anger, instead of looking for any means of self-help, he goes and then he speaks to his mind. And in that case, if he feels he's hungry and the president is responsible, he can go out and abuse the president. He holds an opinion and say, look, Mr. President, you are the reason why yam is expensive in this country, and I think you are a failure. That's an example. And there is a reason why so much of freedom is guaranteed for a Nigerian, so that there will be constant democracy. People will always resort to, George off speech rather than taking up arms. Yes, but you see, when there are rivals in business, yes.
No, go on. Sorry, I wanted you to finish your sentence before I ask you the next one.
When there are rivals in business, there may be business of providing professional service, and one lawyer or a doctor goes out to manufacture a false claim and publishes it in order to diminish the reputation of his rival. For goodness sake. Yes, you do have the opinion, you have the right to hold opinion, but you have manufactured a false opinion, you have published it, it has injured another person's ability to earn. And when you're talking about injuring another person's reputation to the point that the person is unable to psychologically handle it, and then the person commits suicide. So that's the reason why the defamation is not only something that is libelous as a civil wrong, but it's also criminal, because there are a lot of very dangerous consequences that can flow from the spread of false information intended with the intention to cause harm, with the intention to reduce the value of anybody or any corporation in the eyes of the public.
Okay, that was the question I was going to ask you before you just answered you just said in your answer. Okay, let me get back to Book in the House. Now, you saw where Tietie spoke about how damaging this libel can be, especially when there's no evidence to support it.
Sure.
Do you understand? So how can one respond without creating even more conflict, especially when there's no truth, or no iota of truth, or there's no evidence of the accusation being made? What are the steps that you need to take to change that narrative?
So like I said earlier, you have to really, really assess the situation. And luckily for us in Nigeria, we have media monitoring agencies. So you can actually see what public opinion is saying about the matter, and then you start to assess. And then you have to plan how to respond. A lot of people, when faced with situations like this, don't respond, and that's very wrong. You must.
So sometimes silence is not the best answer.
Silence is not the best answer, and I think you should respond.
Okay, if
especially
I came to you
how
now,
damaging
for
it
instance,
is.
and say that somebody wrote an article about me sleeping with a dog inside the gutter or something, or something so absurd that is, there's no, the chances of it being true is just totally
Sure, I mean,
impossible.
obviously, for
what
something
are the
that
primary steps that you take from beginning to the end to achieve your aim?
So if you came to me with that situation, the first thing I would do is that we would have to assess the situation. And then we have to start planning how you will respond, what platforms you will be responding on.
Okay, so you would have to use platforms.
Definitely. And at that point, we're also then going to decide if you need a lawyer or not, because sometimes you do need a lawyer and we need to know what the legal ramifications are for things like this. And then, it depends. Is the story true or not? And that's where that's the next step.
Yes,
and if it is
not true.
Sure, and if it is true, I always vouch for transparency. You have to be transparent in situations like this because guess what? Nigerians are super smart. We can tell when something just doesn't sound very right. So you have to be transparent. You have to own up to it. Sometimes issuing an apology might be important. And then also, and most importantly for me, showing what changes you're making to fix the situation. Now, if it is not true, then you need to respond with some facts. And if there needs to be any legal actions, then you do that as well.
Yeah, but you know that the power of bad news, it goes much...
It spreads
much faster
It spreads.
than good news.
And it's very, very unfortunate because nowadays you walk into a meeting and someone's never met you before.
And
they're going to Google your name and what's coming up.
Yeah,
and what's your digital footprint.
Google one, do you understand? How do you now drown the negativity with positivity?
By issuing positive news.
So, but would that
And then there are
ever
other ways, search engine optimization, working with your own website, blogging, contributing. I mean, there's things that we do that can possibly move those stories down to maybe page 2 or 3 where most people won't be looking at.
Okay, but what about instances where it's actually true? We've heard of scandals that have happened to some public figures, and some of them have been able to change the narrative to their advantage, while some have just totally faded into oblivion.
I find the most successful people that have managed to changing the narrative to their advantage is when they decide to own the story.
So, but do you now have to do things to actually create a more positive outcome?
You have to.
Like schools, for instance, that have been involved in scandals and what have you. What do you think some of them have done wrong that image that the public have of them haven't changed?
Okay, so what I find, and I mean, we've had quite a few schools that have had issues. Distancing themselves from the crisis never works. And that's what I find a lot of people are doing. It's like, oh, we didn't do it, and, trying to distance themselves from the story, as opposed to saying, this happened in our school. And these are the steps that we're taking to make sure that it doesn't happen again, because you have to rebuild trust. You know what I mean? You can't leave people thinking that your school is not properly managed and things like that. You have to rebuild trust.
Do you now do charitable ventures to also, or corporate social responsibility?
I don't buy into that. I mean, some people do that, but for me, it's so expected to become. I mean, now you're doing, you're doing charitable ventures. Why? What does that have to do with the school? And I'll give an example. We've had situations where a school has been accused of maybe a child being bullied and things like that. And then maybe something happens with that child. What do you do when that happens? You're seeing situations where people are saying, oh, it didn't happen here, or these kids didn't do this and X, Y, and Z, and that's not, distancing yourself from the situation is not the answer. I want to see that you have, formed an anti-bullying committee comprised of students and things like that. Those are the kinds of things that you want to see. People actually making real changes.
Okay, well,
not pretending to make a change and
what
using
about if it's a
causes.
sexual thing and the videos are there to show that this happened? How do you, as a victim of that, change the narrative?
Possibly owning it. We've seen situations
But
where
would you
people
actually come out verbally to own it?
I don't think so.
You just will not deny it? Because
I mean,
evidence
if your
is there.
picture is there
Yes.
and if your video is there, I mean,
Or a naked picture.
there's
or
no
whatever.
denying that. It is there.
So how do you now change the narrative to the extent where you now earn the respect that the people have lost for you?
It takes a while. It takes a while, Ruth, for you to earn that respect back. And it does involve you working, obviously, on your personal brand and taking certain actionable steps to let people remember who you are. But I can't really go into detail as to how some of these things are handled, but it is possible. We've seen situations where people have had, damaging information being thrown out there and are able to navigate through that kind of crisis.
That's because that is where the PR thing really comes in handy.
It does.
You know.
It does, because we have the relationship with the media, and the media does shape perception.
Yeah, one-on-one synchronization.
Of course.
But we're going on a break. We will be right back on Perspectives. Don't go anywhere soon. Grab your cup of tea and join us right back. Okay, so can we have Frank back in the house? Welcome back to Perspectives. Can we have Frank back in the house, please? Now, Frank, let me ask you, is criminal defamation enforceable in countries like Nigeria? And how can individuals navigate accusations of abusing the legal system in defamation disputes?
See, criminal defamation is in the criminal law books. It's in the penal code. It's in the criminal code. That makes it law in this country. And the goal of criminal law, criminal procedure, is to ensure deterrence. What it means is that those agencies that are referred to as that have prosecutorial powers can actually activate those provisions whenever the facts whenever the facts support any complaint by anybody who makes such complaints to the authorities. So the police, together with all other law enforcement agencies, particularly the various attorney generals of the 36 states, together with the Attorney General of the Federation, can invoke the provisions of criminal defamation. There is a reason why defamation is both criminal and civil. It's civil because it costs money, it costs people a lot, especially when it's proven to be, when charges of defamation are proven to be substantiated. In that case, the monetary damages, I would say, could be ordered by the court, because persons who have victims actually have suffered. And in the case of in the criminal dimension, because consequences flowing from the spread of injurious information about the reputation of other persons can lead to things that are supposed to be prevented by criminal law itself. It ensures that persons who engage in such spread of bad information about people with the intention to reduce their worth, their value in the public, are also punished, so that those who are saying it would take lesson from that. Let me tell you, there's a dangerous dimension that is going on right now. Before now, and there's a natural appetite in the human being for scandals, for salacious news, for sensational news. And that's why before the age of the internet, in this country and several other places, we see newspapers that run on publishing gossips about celebrities. But you see, let me tell you what the epidemic is. The epidemic now is that every citizen, I would say, anybody that has access to the internet can now turn himself into that person who can publish anything. But let's interrogate something, because the Constitution guarantees the right to privacy. So to what end are you publishing people's nude pictures? To what end are you publishing people's privacy in terms of sexual relations that they had with other persons? In law, generally, character evidence is not really admissible. However, if you hold out yourself to be a very clean person, then somebody can actually, as they say it in the US, go and dig up dirt about you, especially in the political season, and then they publish it. The idea is also, because the goal of free speech ultimately is truth. So let the truth be out there. So when it comes to enforcement of the provisions against defamation in this country, criminal defamation, once a conviction is grounded, of course, the courts will proceed to sentence. But you see, we have had fine examples of how to deal with matters of defamation, and not necessarily make them sensational, but at the same time trying to stem it. There are ways you can deal with it. The expert over there is talking about how to handle the PR side of it. There are many other ways you can deal, even in the law. And a fine example is the way Femi Falana dealt with the unfounded statements that they said Bobrisky made against him, even though Bobrisky didn't publish that. It was published by the very dark man. But Falana was very, very smart and very honorable to say, look, he promotes human rights, and he cannot be seen to be stifling freedom of speech by punishing people even when they make mistakes. Okay. However, the truth must be told, and look at the path he followed, and that was he went to a court under a civil procedure, and then had the truth, established, the statements withdrawn, and then with some apologies. So that's how it should be done in a civilized society. Okay. But look, you can't not stand by when your business rival publishes something untrue about your product, I mean your bottled water product, for example, or your baked beans or whatever it is, and then you do nothing, and then you think you should just go to court and establish truth. No. But there is a smart way one company, I won't mention their name, they should pay for advert. They a very smart way. Somebody went and maligned and gave a very false information about that particular margarine in this country, and that it's more or less plastic. And the guys came out with simply correct information, and that it is simply for your health, that this thing goes into your body and comes out as it is, so that it doesn't get stored up and then you become a fat person. So you can only counter untruth with some measure of truth.
But that reminds
However,
me,
with some deliberate intentional act, with to attack another person, I believe that the law is very correct to embark in punishing any person with a term of imprisonment if he intends to use false information to damage the reputation of another person. Do you know what it takes to build a reputation? It takes a lawyer, it takes a doctor, it takes we all live by our reputation, and therefore nowhere you go and take some hidden from some stuff you gather from our privacy, and then you go and publish it. To what end?
But that reminds
we must activate that criminal side of defamation.
That reminds me of that situation with the tomato paste. Remember the story of the girl that had made observation about tomato paste, and that they said that the company that created that product overreacted, and human rights activists got involved and what have you. So now, talking of that, what are ex parte orders in defamation? Are ex parte orders in defamation cases fair? And should police be involved in civil matters like defamation involving public figures?
There is no point to be emotional about this. The truth is this: ex parte orders exist to arrest urgent situations. So if there is falsehood that is being published and it's ongoing and is capable of causing irreparable damage, for goodness sake, that individual, the victim, can approach the court without the presence of the party affected, the alleged party who is publishing, and ask the court for orders. Stop the publication of this book, stop the distribution of this book, stop the publication of this material on this channel or on that channel or on Facebook or on any of the social media channels. The idea is, so long as the damage would be irreparable, if ultimately it's found out that this whatever is being published on true. So ex parte orders are perfectly in order. The good thing about ex parte orders is that they don't last for very long. Sometimes, and most times, they last maximum for just 14 days, with which the person who has published it can come to court and either justify it or acknowledge it or pull it down or whatever. But you see, why would the police come in? The police only comes in when there is a complainant. When somebody, it's a three. We often say it in court that justice is a three-way. It has a three-way approach. That is justice for the victim, justice for even the accused person, and justice for the public, in the public interest. So the police is supposed to be neutral at all times. There is a complainant, but the interest of the public is you must stop a certain deviant behavior. We need to preserve the societal morality, and that's the reason why Section 24 of the Cyber Crimes Act exists. So you have somebody's nude pictures, you have somebody's private pictures. What do you gain? Let me tell you, you gain when you are able to publish it on your X handle, or you publish it on Facebook, or you publish it on Instagram. The idea is this new dimension of monetizing viewership on social media is a very dangerous trend. That is, the more views you get, the more trending your channel is, the money you get. Now, that created this bizarre atmosphere where people now go out and look for sensational news, even to the point of carrying out obnoxious activities, finding out bad things about especially celebrities, especially important people, and then publishing it out there, because there is a natural tendency in the human being to always look out for what bad thing is happening to his neighbor, in order to feel better about himself. Because we're always trying to keep up with the Joneses. So this is the epidemic we are facing. I know that a number of times, especially those of us in the human rights community, we have canvassed that, look, you don't have to go against free speech. But please, we must also preserve the societal morality. Therefore, the goal is not actually to hamper free speech, it's to ensure the responsible administration and expression of freedom of speech.
Thank you so much, Frank.
This idea of we are turning the social media to something else where we are now finding out, calling out people and then creating some self-styled persons who are now going after people's reputation, whereas they can't even build one. Do you know what it means to go to school and to become a lawyer or to become a doctor, and then you just, in one tweet that's untrue, you want to pull down somebody's reputation down, his ability to earn and feed his family?
I totally agree with you, and Frank. We're going to expatiate on this. We're going on another break, so please stay with us. We'll be right back on Perspectives. Welcome back to Perspectives. Let me get to booking now. You heard what Frank just said about how damaging a reputation can be to somebody's hard-earned reputation when the vitriol written about him is so offensive and very, very, it's really, really bad for the brand and can kill the brand. So when these kind of things happen, and people react just as strongly as what they were accused of, people react to the accuser, can it be judged as a sign of guilt or taken as a natural response to such provocation?
So I think that it's unfair. I mean,
because there's already the court of public
opinion.
opinion.
It is. And it can be unfair where, the public has heard a certain story and they're judging without the facts. And that's why you have to be very strategic and diligent in how you respond, because you're fighting for your reputation, and your reputation is everything. So using all of the right channels and responding properly is important, and you can't be tone deaf. You have to really, really understand public perception as well on the matter, and then tackle it that way. And that's why you work with the experts to do that kind of thing.
No, but when you even say public perception, how long, for instance, does it even take to correct a damaged reputation? I mean, on a realistic level, especially if it's not true, but the public is already divided into two sides. One side believe, the other side don't. How long does it take to even regain the trust of the public? Both with individuals and companies.
It can take a while for individuals or organizations. And you have to go through that journey.
So when you say, what? A year, 2 years?
2 years, I've seen 5 years.
2 years. 5 years.
Depending on how
damaging
it is. It can take a while.
Oh my goodness.
And you have to go
long
through that
time.
process. Yes, it is. And that's why reputation is everything. And that's why people work hard by putting crisis management plans in place for their organizations for when crisis does happen. And you have to prepare yourself for things like this.
Does it even get worse when the victims, or rather the culprits, or the people, I don't want to use any word negatively for both sides, when the culprit or the person behind this damaging news now turn around and place the victim? How do you now address that? Because I know that in Burna Boy's case, he got Speed Darlington arrested, and there was this big hula baloo about because he's a star, he's used his stardom as an advantage. Same thing with blah 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 and Dele Faturuti. Right now, we can't even judge because we don't know who is right and who is not wrong, or what is true or what is false. But is it not a natural instinct to use your might and clout to want to react? So when they play victims, how do you now manage that? Because as you're doing what you're doing, they themselves are also exploiting the situation to suit them. So how do you now manage your reaction in such a way whereby
you manage your reaction,
perpetrator would not be seen as a victim?
You manage your reaction by getting the right team in place to manage that for you. You
so does the victim also have the PR person working for them?
Probably not. But then whose reputation is at stake here? If it's your reputation at stake, you have no idea what the other person's doing. All you have is either your facts and what you're putting forward and how you're responding.
Okay, do you think in Burna's case now, because this is already public, do you think it was wrong for him to have arrested Speed Darlington?
I probably wouldn't have gone by
What would you have advised
arresting.
him to do?
Legal. I would have gone the legal route.
Yeah, but but if the thing is so damaging that it's affecting him immediately.
Honestly,
and he doesn't have
I
the
don't think
patience-
anything Speed Darlington, I mean, forgive me, says is going to really destroy all of
No, it won't,
Burner's
yes, it won't
accolades.
destroy, but it's just...
You know what I mean?
It can leave a...
But yes, but then it does
bitter
leave
taste.
that, thought that, is he this way or that way?
Yeah, exactly.
Burner Boy
And if he's
has...
not,
Right,
that's-
but, he's built a strong brand. It will be a bit difficult to tear that down completely.
Yes.
Yes, you might have some people that will believe this or that, and which is why I would go the legal route, as opposed to arresting.
Oh, okay. That's it. Because I've seen situations where, okay, let's use an international star, Kate Moss, at that time when she was accused of taking cocaine. This was like about several decades ago. But she changed the narrative and still turned around to become one of the biggest models of her time during that period.
But then if you think about it, change the narrative how? You probably heard that she went to rehab. That was probably somewhere.
Okay.
You've probably learned that, she's been clean for X amount of days, and you've probably seen her, blossoming in her career. You have to show the steps, especially if you're caught in a situation.
Well, that's
if the accusation is true, what are you doing to fix that? And then let me tell you where it gets a little bit more complicated, is that you don't just owe it to the public. You have the internal side of things, especially if you're an organization. If the company takes a hit on a negative reputation, your staff is affected. All your internal team
like that situation.
You have to work. You have to work through it from the inside out.
You remember that incident where a lady claimed she was raped by her colleague?
Yes.
There was a company, we're not calling names, but the lady claimed she was raped. So in such situations now, what could the company have done to make sure that, it shows that they're at least on their...
No, but it wasn't, that didn't happen with the company. It happened with an individual that works...
They were both individuals of a particular company.
Sure.
So the company also suffered damage of reputation.
Of course,
Do you understand?
and that's where, as a company, and forgive me, someone has to take a hit, right? As the company, this has happened, and this is not allowed to happen in your company because I assume that you have policies that protect women in your organization. You will be firing someone.
Okay, so what should they have done? Should they have fired the person that was accused immediately?
They should have been let go immediately while pending investigation.
Okay, and even if it was found that he was
found that it's
innocent?
innocent, then he could be reinstated if he still wants the job, and then compensated.
Do you think they should have done any charitable ventures or corporate social responsibility ventures to show that they support women?
Yep,
and
the
blah, blah, blah?
organization can then go ahead to reiterate their policies where sexual harassment and things like that are not allowed in that organization, and show how it actually supports and protects
so that
women.
Means they would have done things.
It has to be ongoing. You don't just say sorry and then keep quiet.
That's what I was saying.
And that's what I keep noticing, is that people just address it and then
once you've denied it and that's
Once
it.
you've denied it, then you're gone.
And that doesn't really work.
No, it doesn't really work. If you want to maintain and build that trust, you have to show how you are,
So what would if they
sorting
came,
out
that
the
kind of company
situation.
came to you, for instance, now, and you had a to-do list? What are the first major things you'd ask them to do? Would you ask them to create an event that will support women, or go to a charitable place to show that this, what would they do?
I really wouldn't do the whole charity thing because I think that that's overplayed in this market.
Okay, so what would
we
they
can
have done
see through
if
that
you had
now.
to give 5 different steps?
Can I send you a bill?
Okay, you don't want to share your marketing
No,
tips.
that's not it. But if that company came to me, so obviously, staff member would have to be let go, not let go, but then just things placed on hold pending investigation. And then I'm going to reiterate how we protect women in that organization as well. You know what I mean? And then you have to just, keep the lines of communication open, because if you leave such a person in your organization, what does that say?
Yeah,
What does that say?
Well, wrong message.
And what if it happens again? Your entire reputation will be done.
Yes.
Yeah, so you have to take steps.
So let's get back to Frank. Frank, are you in the house? Can we see Frank, please?
Yes.
Okay, Frank, I was just saying to Buki now about, managing your reputation. So legally, what is the burden of evidence required to prove defamation in court, like in Dele Faturoti, and I keep using them, both of them, as Bidanitin's priest. What is the burden of proof that they need, and what legal remedies exist for those who actually believe they've been defamed without proof, like Faturoti, like Babalola and Burna Boy?
Oh, well, the case of Faturoti and Babalola being in court, will limit the level of expression I would make in this regard. In that regard, I would say. But the truth is that first of all, it has to be reputational. It has to be published. Then it also has to be false. You have to prove that the statement or the publication is false. And then, fourthly, and more importantly, there has to be evidence. You have to lead evidence as to the level of damage it has caused. Now, before I go further in the legal implications and the legal dimension, I'm a member of the Nigerian Institute of Public Relations. And my colleagues and I share one thing and one philosophy, that no publicity is bad publicity. So let's get that straight. As a PR manager, once you get into the threshold of the public as an individual, as a company or as a corporation or whatever, once you get into that public sphere, you must realize that your people will hold opinion about you, which is guaranteed by the Constitution. People will also express that opinion. I will make this reference to that margarine manufacturing company, that persons who work for companies that produce such kind of things should learn from that company the way it managed that social media onslaught. It managed it successfully, and its sales even became bigger. Many persons who didn't know that the product was actually good for their health, they got to know because when the company attended to explain. So no publicity is bad publicity. And part of the reason why many of us always honor television interviews and radio and television interviews, because it's giving us free publicity. And that's why when we get it, we'll put everything we have into it, because we're selling ourselves. So publicity is always good. How do you handle bad publicity? The truth about it is that it just tells you where you are. That's the public opinion about you. So redesign. That's why you need to rework and redesign and find a new pedestal. However, the challenge is this. It is in that intentionality on the person who does it. You see, let me be honest with you. There is reason to fight because it's a natural instinct. There is also a reason to flee, and which is more or less silence. It's giving a silence mode. Let me tell you, it also depends it depends on the personality of who is making the false statement, who is causing the defamation. Let me give you a very interesting reason. I'll say this in public for the first time. When I was a young lawyer who had access to radio and television for the first time in the city of Abuja, I had a client who was a politician who convinced me that the judge took bribe. He mentioned the name of the judge, and he told me the amount that the judge took. I was so foolish and stupid, I went to a local radio station and announced the name of the judge, and I announced the amount, and I announced the case that the judge took bribe. Now, that would have been the end of my career. I would have been, as a lawyer, and the judge, it was recorded and was presented to the judge. Look at the reaction of the judge. A very powerful known judge in the FCT. What did he do? He simply called the chairman of the NBA Unity Bar Abuja branch and said, "Look, who's that lawyer? Call him, warn him." And when I approached a politician, where is the evidence? I said, I don't have, so the person told me. I raised my hands in the air, I started begging. And the good thing is that the judge told the NBA president, the NBA chairman, as a letter on, he said, "Look, how do we destroy a young man who is misguided by this?" And the guy was silent, because I was a nobody at that time. And nobody heard about it. You don't know anything about the judge. You don't know anything about the case and all that. So it can be smart to just, rise above it. And that's the stuff judges are made of. We are told in my administrative law class how a judge sits and then the accused person just wanted to cause there and gain, undue attention, takes a raw egg and then, throws it at the judge. It hits the judge, but the judge simply says, clean it off and let the case go on. He didn't shout. He didn't have to convince convict the person. He didn't have to convict the person or try the person for contempt. So there's a way you manage these things. However, if the person who is making that statement is an enemy, is a business rival with the intention, as it is in the case of Burna Boy and the other man. You know, if Burna Boy were to perceive that, look, with my high and towering reputation, this man hates me and he wants to bring me down by lying against me, of course, the first reaction in fighting is to use your influence. What many people don't know, and I need to let you know, is that people use their influence, they deploy their influence whenever they are threatened. What's the influence? Whether it's their reputation, whether it's their connection, whether it's a connection among judges, connection among policemen, connection among those high and mighty, or even in the media. They will use them at every point in time when their fighting instincts are aroused or they are activated. However, I know that because no publicity is bad publicity, when bad publicity comes around, what you need to do is simply just realize that, boy, you missed the management of the privacy. This is what the public thinks about you now. You can probably change from being this person or that you used to be as a politician and now become a pastor, and then to show the world that you have changed, and then open a mega church and still be the trending guy that you used to be. So it is the way you manage the publicity that matters. Going back to law, the truth about it is that there are defenses that those persons who have been accused of defamation can actually raise. Justification, the truth is always a defense. And like they say as Christians, like the Bible says, the truth shall set you free. So the truth will always set you free. And I tell you, the process, the procedure of establishing truth, why I wouldn't want the defamation case to go criminal, is that the man will be telling you that this is the reason why I said you are a bad person. This is, and so more death will be brought out that the public would not have known. So it's important that you learn from what the masters have done. I cannot thank Femi Falana enough. He didn't make a matter of a very dark man. All he needed to do was to establish the truth and then made nonsense of whatever was said about him. I know Femi Falana so well. He's senior advocate of Nigeria. Why would he be involved with such kind of elements? No, not at all. And we're talking about, you know on the face of it that it's untrue, but however, if that statement was not made by somebody that is inconsequential, if it was being made by another senior advocate for the purpose of reducing the reputation of Femi Falana, it would have been a different matter entirely. Femi Falana would not have avoided involving the police in tracking down and getting to the point of the root of the matter through investigation. So so there are a whole lot of things. By the way, there are certain persons that cannot be defamed. The president in sitting cannot be defamed. How? If a Nigerian holds the opinion and abuses his president and he says, look, it's his opinion. Prior to when he becomes president, it's a different matter. But now he's president, he's a public servant, and then the man is holding an opinion, inconsequential opinion, and the president will say it's defamed. I have not seen anybody more defamed than President Tinubu in the build-up to the election. Balablu and false certificates and pushing of drugs and all sorts of things. Look at the way he managed it. So there are certain personalities who can simply raise themselves to that pedestal and say they cannot be defamed because of their towering nature. So it's a very complicated issue and that we cannot really unpack in this short space of time that we have.
Okay. Frank, very, very comprehensive answer there. You totally swallowed us up with your mannerisms and gesticulations and explanations. Thank you so much. Let me get back to Mbuki. You know, I like what he said about the perception, what public perception plays in the world of public courts. Do you understand? So do you think that sometimes this can also influence the outcome of certain cases? Of course. When the public is so biased towards the right or wrong direction.
Public opinion is so heavy.
I also like the part where he spoke about sometimes you also have to know how far you want to go in your reaction because they might uncover even more things. So in that kind of situation, when you're faced with a client who is very angry that so and so has been written about them, and this time they are innocent, but they have a few skeletons in their cupboards. So how would you advise such a client if what is said to you is so damaging, albeit not true, but you have one or two things that might come out in the open if you decide to react so strongly? Like in any situation, you have to assess the risks. If we go head on, is this going to be uncovered? Is that going to be uncovered? And that's why I keep repeating that you must assess
assess, monitor. Because if you have a situation where there's further damaging information that could possibly come out, then how you respond, obviously,
Look,
would
let me
have
even
to be
ask,
strategic.
what about if you're being blackmailed?
Happens all the
A
time.
company is being blackmailed or somebody's being blackmailed. How do you manage that?
It's tough. And it happens here.
Would you tell them
quite
to own
a
it
bit.
so that you render the blackmailer powerless, or what do you do?
So you have two situations, and unfortunately, some people do negotiate with the blackmailers and go scot-free. And then sometimes, unfortunately, you don't, and then you're ready for that hit of whatever it is.
Blackmailers are insatiable.
No, they are.
They come the first time, they come the second time. What
Yeah.
if it's very, very
And they
damaging?
come with information that's, I'd say 80% of the time, factual.
Exactly.
That's
Obviously, you
the
won't have anything to
issue.
blackmail
They're not
with.
going to blackmail you with, stuff that's not there.
So what do you advise the clients? If, for instance, I was your client and then maybe I'm married and I had an affair 10 years ago. I've been married for 20 years. I had an affair 10 years ago. And it was a very hot romance. And I confided in a friend who now confided in another friend. Do you understand? And then I'm now being blackmailed.
Are there videos and
Well, there
Is
might
there
not be
evidence?
videos, but there might be text exchange, there might be something, because blackmailers have to have something to
No, they
blackmail
do.
you. So what do you advise? If I was your client, what would you advise that I did? Not that it happened to me, I'm just giving an example.
do you want to discuss this off air?
Okay, you are really keeping your trade secrets.
No, it's not.
No, because I've seen situations where things like this do happen. Do you understand?
And I have as
and the
well.
victim is in a dilemma whether or not
Sure.
to talk to the blackmail. So would you really advise that they own it? They come out and own it?
You can, if you can take
To the detriment
hit.
of your marriage?
If you can take the hit, you can own it. And obviously you have to discuss with your spouse, and everyone would have to be on the same page. And that's why you've seen many situations with public figures that have issues like this, and you see their spouse standing right there. It's all planned internally and all of that. And then if not, then, there are other steps. But
But because I know
as PR practitioners, we're meant to be ethical.
yes,
And that's the thing.
yes.
So we can't really advise you to do anything that's unethical.
So in other words, own it and render the blackmailer useless.
Good.
You would never advise them to pay as a PR person?
We're ethical in an ethical business.
Oh my goodness. But I know that, let me get to Tietie before, let me round up with Tietie, then I get back to Buki for one last Kini. What advice would you give to someone who cannot afford a good lawyer, but has a reputation to protect, and he has been accused of something that he didn't do by somebody who can afford a lawyer or doesn't have evidence? But so how would you advise somebody who can't afford a good lawyer to approach such situation?
Okay, so I think the role of the journalist is very important here. There is need for objectivity in the media. A lot of objectivity is needed. So if you don't have access to a lawyer and you don't have access to a PR expert, the truth is that you must, as a matter of course, and that's the idea of free speech, have access to the medium that was used in defaming you. If it was published, you also go ahead and publish the truth. Now, if it is the truth, you also acknowledge. There's what we call, there are times where you confess, you admit, and then you also parry by varying the truth, by giving opinion. And there are what we call extenuating elements that kind of, they mitigate whatever wrong that has been done. The truth about it is that there will always be scandals. It's simply that it's the person whose own is known that is being made ridicule of. People always have scandals, always have skeletons in our cupboard. And that's why the Constitution realizes and says, look, it is a fundamental right, a right that is of equal importance to the existence of Nigeria, that keep people's privacy private.
Thank you so
the idea
much.
is that I stand for anybody who goes out. I stand for the punishment, for the activation of criminal procedure against anybody who intentionally goes out to malign, to destroy the reputation of another person. There's no doubt about that. But if it is For the larger public good, it's a different matter. Go ahead and prove that you have a higher reason. You are not Jesus Christ to not tell the world that you are the chief morality, the Mahatma Gandhi, the Mother Teresa, by saying that you are better than this other person. See how bad this person is. What do you gain from that? Whereas we in Africa, we have a challenge of how to civilize our
Thank
space.
you so much.
In order for us to catch up with the rest of the world. And then there are some other people whose job is to drag others down.
It's called Operation Pull Him Down. Thank you so much, Frank Tietie, for being with us today. And thank you so much, Vicky George Taylor, for sharing a deeper perspective on this whole issue of blackmail and handling defamation and reputation crisis. Thank you so much. So navigating the intersection of reputation, free speech, and accountability is a delicate and complex path. Accusations, whether true or not, leave lasting scars on individuals and public discourse alike. We must all consider our responsibility, not only in defending ourselves, but in holding others accountable. And as I keep saying, remember that life is a learning curve. As we close today's discussion, let this serve as a reminder of the power of words and the responsibility they carry. That's all we have time for today. You've been watching Perspectives here on Arise News with me, Ruth Osime. So grateful for your company today. I shall be back same time next week. Until then, do have a great week ahead. Goodbye.